Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. We are so happy to welcome back to the program Matt Walsh. For the past year, he's been hard at work on a new documentary called What is a Woman? It was just released last night, and almost immediately the Daily Wire says its website came under an attack in an attempt to disrupt the premiere. Subsequently, some users were not able to watch it. And there is a reason they don't want you to see this film, and that you must. The Daily Wire reporting that this was still the biggest live streaming event in company history. Now, Matt Walsh is known for his witty sense of humor, and at times the documentary is very funny. He's just deadpan. He's like unbreakable. I listened to another podcast from the Daily Wire with everybody sort of backstage, and the director was saying, "Don't play poker with Matt." And it's 100% true. But at its core, this film has a very serious message, and one you really are going to want to hear. He interviews some of the top gender affirming doctors in America. That's a thing. He investigates why children are being pushed toward hormone therapy and even life-altering surgeries, young children. And he looks into how the transgender movement also affects women's rights. Matt, so good to have you back. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Congrats. Congrats on the release of the film. The experts that you went to were not surprised that they waffled and they wiggled, but they were actually like offended at you just kind of following up. And you had your same affect and your same manner that you have here. You're very matter of fact. I was thinking, I like this guy. I like the way you do your interviewing. I'm definitely more emotional. I'm more passionate, half Italian, half Irish. It's that kind of combo. I know you got some Irish in there, but I like how you just didn't show your cards, but still they were getting so angry. They were getting so annoyed at you.
It's actually a sincere question too, because when for example, a man says, "I identify as a woman," the point of asking what is a woman is it's a way of asking, well, what do you mean? What are you trying to say about yourself exactly when you make that statement? Can you just explain it a little bit? I want to know. I want to understand. And they do get offended by it. And that's, I talked about the fear from the just average Joes on the street, some of them. But the so-called experts, there was definitely fear also there because they didn't want to answer questions. But from them, I got a lot of anger because from their perspective, this is not how a conversation is supposed to go, especially if they're talking to some flannel-clad, bumpkin like myself. I'm supposed to just sit there while they make their proclamations and declarations, and I'm supposed to sit there kind of slack-jawed and just listening and nodding my head and saying, okay. The moment you ask any question whatsoever, it's actually offensive because it's like, well, how dare you question me? How dare you express skepticism in anything I'm saying? That's another thing that was a little bit of a revelation is that before we embarked on making this film, I knew that the what is a woman question would be a real stumper for some of these people, even though it shouldn't be. But what I didn't quite realize is that actually any question at all is a stumper for them because they don't want to answer any sincere question. If you're asking a sincere question about their worldview, a sincere question as in there's some skepticism, you're asking the question because you're questioning what they're saying. Any question along those lines, doesn't matter what it is, they don't want to answer, and they'll get very angry that you are asking it.
Well, case in point, we didn't cut this one, but I watched it last night with my husband, and this was his favorite. His favorite was when you interviewed Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat of California, first openly gay person of Asian descent in Congress. He ended the interview when you started asking about bathrooms, and you could tell he was upset. And he was saying, like, I can't believe you're taking this to the bathroom place instead of focusing on the basic rights of this life. So, like, for you to even bring up, what about women who don't want to see a naked penis in the bathroom or in the locker room? For you to even go there was judged inappropriate. That's not even the proper question. It's about a trans person's need to live a, quote, normal life.
Yeah, and I agree with your husband, too, by the way. That was actually my favorite interview to do just because it was so... maybe it's my sadistic side of me, but he was just so uncomfortable. And plus, he's a politician. I'm not a big fan of politicians. So, and you could tell me, we sat there and talked for a while, and he wanted to get up and leave the moment he realized that I was going to ask real questions. And he still sat there for a while before he finally did storm out. But the question that I was asking him when he did finally leave was obviously totally legitimate, and it was a policy question. right? Because we were talking, he's an advocate of the Equality Act, which would be a federal law that just basically encodes gender ideology, imposes it on a federal level across all states and localities. And that would mean, among other things, that now, according to the federal law, biological males they now have a human right to access female spaces. That's what the Equality Act would declare. And so my question was, well, what about, I understand what you're saying is that there are males who would feel uncomfortable if they're not given access to those spaces. What about the women who are uncomfortable sharing those spaces with males? Like, what about, how do you factor that in? How do you weigh that? Totally fair question. And he didn't want to answer that at all.
No.
And then they started babbling about, well, really, this is a matter of the right to life. Well, no one is questioning that. No one is saying that trans people don't have a right to live. What we're talking about is, do women have a right to privacy in these kinds of spaces? That's actually the question.
Part of the fun of the film is seeing the light bulb go off over these people's heads once they realize that they're talking to somebody who might not share their agenda, who might not be there to totally celebrate, the stuff that they push. And you're very fair to them. It's in no way like a hit job on them or an ambush. Your questions are very benign. But it's kind of fun to see them realize, oh, wait, I might be in trouble. This guy might actually ask me these hard questions. And some didn't answer them. Some kept, like that guy in Tennessee with the blonde hair, kept like putting it back on you. Well, what do you think? What do you think? Which is always a stall tactic. And one exchange in particular I appreciated, because I mentioned this recently on the show. Years ago, when Chaz Bono danced on Dancing with the Stars. Remember, I can't remember Chaz's name as a girl, Chastity. But she was born female, Chastity. She was born female, and then she decided to transition to male and went by Chaz. And she got a position on Dancing with the Stars. And Keith Aplow came on my show, Matt, and he said, I don't think we should be affirming this kind of thing. And I gave him a hard time. I didn't think that was particularly kind or supportive. And he did say something that it's always stuck with me. He said, there's a disease in psychiatry where, because you'll see where I'm going, somebody really feels like they need to have their arm chopped off. And they will go from psychiatrist to psychiatrist or doctor to doctor saying, I need you to chop off my arm. My arm doesn't belong. I need to be missing this limb. And he said, if somebody came into my office and said that, I would say the same thing to somebody seeking a sex change, which is basically, no, brother, you're not. I won't. Like, I'm not doing it. And lo and behold, you asked one of the people in your piece. Now, the name is Dr. Marcy Bowers. This person will look female, and she says she's a woman. But this is somebody who was born male and has transitioned to female. She doesn't like that. She wants you to say she is a woman. This is annoying. She's not a woman. There's a difference between a woman and a trans woman. Happy to call you a trans woman. It's not the same thing. She doesn't allow for that. And listen to this exchange in soundbite 8.
I don't know if you've ever heard of people in the trans-abled community. These are people who are physically able-bodied but feel like they should be disabled or identify as such. For example, a man who has 2 arms but feels like he should have 1. If a man in this kind of marginalized community went to the doctor and said, I want to have my arm cut off, do you think that
doesn't have anything to do with gender identity?
Well, it's someone's self-identity, how someone identifies.
That's someone who has and I'll accept it as a mental diagnosis, a psychiatric condition. I don't even pretend to know what aptomenophilia is all about, but somehow it's the idea that you're fascinated or charmed by having a limb or part of a limb missing. Okay, I would say that's, pardon my non-medical language, kooky.
You don't see any? You think this is totally irrelevant?
Yep.
Fascinating clip.
Yeah, and of course the answer that Dr. Bowers gives there about the transabled people is correct in a way. I mean, it's kooky. It's weird. It's not, there's something wrong in someone's head. And so obviously if there's something wrong psychologically where you're having trouble accepting your body, who you actually are, then what you need is psychological help. It's just that, it is, and I was pretty floored by that. Just have that written off as well. It's just, that's weird. And so that's why we don't do that. Well, okay, if a man comes in and says that he wants to have his genitals mutilated in pursuit of looking more like a woman, what would we say about that? I mean, of course there's the connection here.